Well, howdy, y'all. This is Randy, aka Banjo Randy, and I'm a totally blind woodworker, meaning totally blind. I have no physical eyesight anymore. I lost my sight, what I had left back in 2006, and a bit of housekeeping. These are an old pair of prescription glasses that I used to wear when I could still see. I think they're from around about the mid 90s to the 2000 up in there, but I only wear them downstairs to protect my eyes. I use them as safety glasses, but I am 100% totally blind. And I wanted to show y'all my latest woodworking project, which is this there outfeed table I built from a table saw. Now I have a Delta 36-725T2 table saw, and I was using a roller stand, but that roller stand is very, very cumbersome, because if you don't have it parallel to the back of the saw, it could cause problems. It could cause your workpiece to drift away from the fence and stuff. So I finally bit the bullet and went ahead and made me an outfeed table. This is made from 3/4 inch Luan plywood. This is some scraps that I had left over. And it measures 30 inches wide by 49 inches long. Now this piece of plywood right here was actually 4 foot by just, I'd say about 5 foot long. So I took and used the plywood's width, in this case, as the length, and the plywood's length I used as the width. The reason I did that, since this was already at 48 inches, the plywood, I knew that I wanted my outfeed table to be at least 48 inches long. So that's why I used the width of the plywood, and that the grains running this way rather than lengthwise with the back of the saw, because it saved me a bunch more cutting. So the first thing I done was I took, and with the circular saw I had in the straight edge, I ripped the very back edge of this nice and straight to where it would be 90 degrees to the edge here, because this particular plywood, I had cut a piece off both ends for a project, and it wasn't too straight. So once I cut the very edge of it, got it parallel or 90 degrees with the corner, I then took the circular saw and straight edge and cut it at 29 inches, cross cut it at 29 inches. I was going to cut it 29 1/4 and take it to the table saw and rip it down to 29, but I decided the cut was really nice and straight with that circular saw, that I just went ahead and cross cut it at 29 inches. Now underneath here, in the field underneath, there is a 2.5 inch strip that runs on all 4 edges, and there's also one in the middle, and that was also made with plywood. Now to cover up the plywood edges, I took and a 2x4, and I ripped a 1/2 inch strip off each edge. I've got a strap over here somewhere. And that way I had some 1/2 inch strips. And the 2x4 I used was about 54 inches long. It was one that I had left over from another project. And so once I done that, I took and put the 2 edge pieces on the ends right on the edges right here, and I let them hang over the sides right here by about 1 inch on both ends of the front and the back. And then I took and cut the piece to fit each end right here. And I did not miter the corners, because this is just for functionality. This is shop furniture, so I wasn't worried about no mitered corners. Once that was done, when the glue dried, I also used glue and 1 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch narrow crown staples. I had some smaller staples, but since I had those in the gun, I just went ahead and used those. So once that dried, I then flush trimmed the edges where they would be flush with the ends right here. And then I took flush trim bit that I have, and I made the top and bottom edges flush to the top and bottom right here. After that was done, I then took a 3/8 inch round over bit and I rounded on the edges, all four of these corners right there. Then when that was done, I then took a 1/4 inch round over bit and rounded on all four edges on the top and bottom. Now the feet right here, to start with, originally I was going to take and make these legs where they would hinge. And the way I was going to do it would have worked if the table would have been longer, but when you hinge one leg up, there's not enough room for this one to hinge by it unless you stagger them, you'll offset them, and I did not want to do that. Now, let me go over here and get something real quick if I can remember where it's at. I think I moved it all the way over here. Yes. Yeah, right here. Now this here is the piece that I used to attach the table to the back of the table saw. That was that piece of 2x4 that I ripped both edges off. And I also, with this 2x4, I took and put a 3/4 inch piece of plywood on the back of that. And the reason I've done that is so that it would throw everything farther out from the back of the table saw, so that the knuckles of these here hinges wouldn't catch this little hold down underneath here on the rip fence. And I had took that off one time, but I put it back on because I just would rather have it on there for me, with me being blind. But on this particular piece here, I made a rabbet, and it's 1/2 inch wide by 3/4 inch deep. And that way, when I attach this to the back of the saw, I would have plenty of room for up and down movement to adjust it to get it level to the back of my table saw here. Now, to attach this rail to the back of the table saw, I used U-bolts. My initial plan was I was just going to drill a couple of holes through there and mount it, but I didn't like that idea. I listened to several posts on a group that I'm in. It's a Delta table saw group I'm in, and some of them said they used U-bolts. So it took me a while to find out what size they were using, and what they were using was 5/16 by 2 9/16 by 5 3/16 U-bolts. So that's what I used. Now on this piece right here, I had to counterbore the 4 holes so that I would have plenty enough room for the nuts to go on there with the washer. And I made me a template. Let's see where that's at. Right here. This is a template that I made for those U-bolts for the back of the saw. And what I've done was on each one of those legs, I put the U-bolt on there, and then I snugged them up. They come with like a little flat bracket, and I snugged them up where they wouldn't just fall off the back of the saw, or behind the saw there. Well, to the inside of the saw, I guess I should say. And then I cut 2 strips. This is the first one I cut, this is the second one. And then I figured out where the holes needed to be for the U-bolts to go through. Then I put each one of these on each one of those U-bolts. And then I took this scrap piece of plywood I had here. Actually, it goes this way. I glued and clamped this first one on, and that way it would bring everything in line with the second one over here. I made sure to keep it flush to the back. And once that was done, like I say, I glued and clamped it with some spring clamps. That's whenever I worked on this piece right here while the glue dried for this. Now when I put these strips on, they're 2.5 inches because I wanted these feet to be 3 inches in from the edge right here. And I'll talk about these brackets here in just a minute I made for the legs. But once I got this, the strip and everything put on, I then took this here loose because it had time to dry. Then I set it on the 2x4 and I marked my holes. And then the first thing I done, like I say, was I bored, I think it was about 1.125" counter bore. And then I took, instead of using a 5/16 diameter drill bit like I did here on these, I then took and used a 3/8" diameter. That way I'd have a little bit of wiggle room, because those U-bolts fit pretty tight in there with the 5/16 diameter bit. So once I got that done, I then put it on the back of the saw, and that was took care of. When I put this back strip on right here, I had to be careful and not, when I put the glue and stapled it on there, I had to make sure that those staples were not nowhere near where I was going to route the groove for the miter groove right here on both sides. Right here and right here. Let me get this here out of the way. I know I'm probably not the best explainer about things, but just doing the best I can, y'all. Now these feet, I made some L brackets right here. This is the way it goes underneath, like this right here. And I put this together with glue and pocket screws, and then I knocked off each corner. I hope y'all can see that maybe right there, so that that wouldn't be sharp. And then I took and counterbored a couple of holes on each side on both brackets, and then I secured this right to the inside edge of that strip underneath. I secured it with glue and screws. Now the pocket, right here. This of course ain't this is just another piece I had for something else. I took and made that pocket right there where those legs would just fit right in there. Snug, not really snugly, but with just a little bit of play in them. That way they won't ever seize up in there or anything if it sets for quite a while like this right here. And I did that on both sides. Now this is the first template that I made to route them grooves. And the only pattern bit that I have is a 1" length. And I had to put this piece underneath here, this piece of 1/2" plywood, to build it up so that I could make a shallower cut. If I hadn't have done that, that would have just been too deep of a cut in the first pass. But I couldn't use this after all, because this is a scrap piece that I use on my workbench if I'm drilling any type of holes freehand. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a spot or two right here where one of those drill holes showed up, and that wouldn't work because the bearing would want to follow that and fall in that little drill hole right there, and that wouldn't work. So instead I made me another template. This time I just simply used 2x4s. That way this bearing, I can make a shallower cut, and I'd have plenty of surface for that bearing to ride against, of course, on the inside right here. And this piece right here, the width of this is 1 3/8. And my length of my grooves right here is 9 inches from the edge of this to the inside where it stops. Now I used, what is that on there? Right there. Oh, there. And I kept this on the saw whenever I done that. This right here is a piece of aluminum miter T-bar. There's that piece right there. All right. Put that out of the way. So what I'd done to find where the slot would go is I turned this upside down. goes like this in the track, but I turned it upside down, and then I simply took this piece here, and I made these cleats long like that so I could clamp it with some bar clamps that I have. And I like that 3/4 inch ledge right there because it gives me a little start for my router bit to start first before I actually make the cut. Yeah. And what I did here is I just simply felt to try to get it as even as I could. Like I say, this is just to give clearance for this miter T-bar right here. And then I clamped it down, and then I made several light passes of about 1/8 of an inch until I got it down to about 7/16 inch deep. That's how I routed these here miter grooves right here. Okay. Set that there. Set this right here. Trying to think of anything else. Oh yeah, the legs. The legs right here are made just from 1x3, just plain old furring strips. It probably don't look the best, the furring strips, but again, all this is for is practicality. I think it's still over here. Let's see. Yeah, right here. It's just made from these strips right here. And then I took it and jointed the face of each leg and one edge of each leg. And then I got them down to 1 3/4 inches using the table saw because I don't have a thickness planer. Now once all that was done, I then took and did my final sanding on it. I just used 180 grit, making sure that all the corners were nice and rounded and smooth, even the corner brackets and all the legs. Now I put 2 coats of water-based satin polyurethane on the underside, and I put 6 coats on the top side right here. I did 2 coats, then I did a light sanding with 220, 2 more coats of light sanding with 220. Then I put 2 more coats on, and then I went with 320, lightly sanded it. Then I put 2 coats of paste wax on it. Now the legs, they also have 2 coats of polyurethane, water-based polyurethane on them. And they also have 2 coats of paste wax. And I went ahead and waxed my table saw down on all the work surfaces here as well. Now to, okay, nothing on there. Kind of hot down here in the basement, y'all, today. Now the one thing about this is I have to lift up on this, and I put a gouge in there about right here because I forgot about me having to move the rip fence, and it was about it was about right there. And then when I lifted up on it, well, it couldn't hardly go nowhere, and I kept thinking, what is wrong? Then it dawned on me the rip fence has to be moved out of the way. So what you do to collapse it is I just hold one side, pick up, take the leg out, take the leg out, and then I let it down. Now the hinges that I use are just a pair of just regular butt hinges, 3.5 inch butt hinges. And one thing I like about that too is if I ever want to just completely remove the table from the saw, all I have to do is just pop these hinge pins out, and I can take the table and still keep the actual rail, the mounting rail, on the back of the saw. But this was a fun project right here. And like I say, I was using just that old roller, outfeed roller. And when you're working with wider material, that's not good because it only had about, I think, about 1 foot in length on the roller. So if you got a piece of wood, ripping a piece of plywood, and you have an offcut over here that's kind of wider. That's not good. But with this outfeed table here, I've got plenty of support now. And also on the bottom of these legs, I just took a 3/8 inch diameter tap and I tapped out a hole, and I'm just using a 3/8 inch diameter carriage bolt. Then if I have to level it, I just take me a crescent wrench and put on the little square shank right there and turn it, you know, in and out to raise it up or down on there. So now, I'm going to put it back up in the up position. And I'll start first with one side. Right in the pocket. And I'll take this piece right here. Yeah, right there. We started where it goes. And there you go. I think this was a fun project, and it ought to give me many years of good use. Again, I know I'm probably not the best at explaining things, but I just want the world to know that just because I don't have eyesight no more doesn't mean that I can't do things. I love my music, and I also love woodworking. And I just want to say to anybody out there that might be listening or watching this video, if you have a disability, never ever give up on your hopes and dreams. Because when I went totally blind, I still wanted to do woodworking. And I think I proved that I'm able to do it and do it safely. And I want to do my best to keep my fingers because I want to play music too. But I just want to say to anybody out there that loves to do woodworking, let's always be careful in the shop. Use proper, safety glasses, hearing protection, and just be aware of what you're doing in your surroundings. And I sure do hope that maybe this video was a blessing to somebody. And I hope y'all folks have a great day, and y'all keep smiling and have a good one. And if you hold on just a second, you should be able to hear a voice over here, because that's the only way I can use my iPhone. I hope that this video turned out all right, y'all.
Take picture. Button. Viewfinder. 22 minutes. 32 seconds. 22 minutes. 32 seconds. Viewfinder. Focus unlocked. Image. Take picture. Button. Stop recording video. Button.